What's up, dudes? Max here. Before we jump into it, I wanted to let you know about the sponsor of today's video, which is Unicorn Overlord. Unicorn Overlord is a strategy RPG that is sort of infused with this nostalgic adventure where you forge alliances, liberate kingdoms, and explore an expansive world with stunning visuals. Speaking of visuals, this is a vanillaware game, and yes, we've been following these games on a variety of systems going all the way back to the Sega Saturn with Princess Crown. You might have checked out one of their other recent games, which is 13 Sentinels, but the focus of this game lies in strategy tactics rather than emphasizing the narrative. It's a classic 16/32-bit era strategy RPG, and yes, that's where I actually played these games the most. Unicorn Overlord has a demo available right now that will carry your progress over to the release, which is March 8th, coming out for the Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch, PS4, and PS5. Again, if you guys would like to learn more or check out more Unicorn Overlord, you can click the link in the description below. There's something I've been meaning to do over the past few days because I've seen this question pop up over and over and over again. So I'm at a spot right now that feels pretty good, right? I'm at a spot where I feel like we've gotten enough of the game to sort of come to like a conclusion on where I feel at the moment, because we've been exposed to how Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's gameplay loop essentially is, between big cinematic set piece dungeons to very large and expansive towns to their dynamic open world. I don't want to do a full game review because it isn't the full game, but a lot of people are like, all right, so give me the first like few chapters review of how you're feeling. And a billion people have been asking about this. So I'm going to do like a less than half game feelings and review, just sort of have this for where I'm at perspectively at the moment, where this could possibly change down the line when I review it down the line. Let's just get the most basic of information out of the way. I think this is one of the greatest games I've ever played, and that's like on a first playthrough situation. Sometimes you and even FF7 Remake had some moments where I'm like, this is really incredible, I can't believe this stuff. But even in FF7 Remake, I could clearly identify some of the things throughout that playthrough that I'm like, yeah, this is less than stellar. This isn't that great. There's some moments of it that are obviously only okay. We're going through another goddamn sewer. But again, the peaks of FF7 Remake really kept it real for me, where like that part of it was just so good. Those characters and the combat, and like in combination with the art and visuals on display, it was like, albeit, you know, some funky Unreal Engine 4 stuff. Remake really hit for me, but I could absolutely, you know, be a realistic person where it's like, yeah, it's clearly not perfect. This game has some rough spots, and upon revisit, you know, I found the game a lot better when you just fly through it and you don't spend a lot of time doing side quests and stuff. So that leads us to Rebirth. FF7 Rebirth seems to be a direct answer, right? Literally a direct answer to some of the bigger aggressive issues that Final Fantasy VII had, or 7 Remake had. First and foremost, the absolute first thing you're going to realize is that, okay, so the cinematic quality of the game and the combat is on point. We really don't have to worry about that. I'll expand into it in a second. But the things that, so they recognize what worked. What did we do well? Well, our characters and our story sequences and our combat is good. Okay, all right, sick. So that stuff, just keep going and just elevate it, right? Just try to make it better. What was lacking? Towns and environments with NPCs were only okay. Pretty much good for just hardcore FF7 fans. You're pretty much looking at a big dumpster the majority of the game, in the slums and stuff. The side quests were 100% passable. A lot of them were barely interesting, to the point of which, like, all right, I'm just here for the reward type of thing. And then the other part of the game was overall explorability. Final Fantasy VII Remake was essentially hallways, and that's not a terrible thing. There was very little exploration, though. The ability to grind almost didn't even exist because the game was just sort of hand-holding you through this experience. It was also really clear that Remake was just trying to be like, well, what do we turn Midgar into? Well, let's just turn it into like what they do with Japan in Yakuza games and stuff like that. And that seemed like we already had this prediction early in like the like 2015 to 2010s when they announced this. Like, it would make sense if the first game is just Midgar, if they made it like a Yakuza sort of situation where they like just focus on the town and shit like that. So yeah, like they did that. So I was worried that that was going to go away, and it hasn't. all they did was just expand it to every single town you go to. They're like, okay, so now every time you visit a new area, it's obviously going to be not compacted by just streets and alleyways and stuff. It's going to be big ass environments and huge worlds and all of this shit. And to me, I'm really, really happy that they kept all of the Yakuza sort of like charm, because there's not really many games like Yakuza that have that kind of charm. And I think the next one is like FF7. Here's what's great about this game. I give this game the same credit that they gave to the same credit and acknowledgement of what it is compared to Final Fantasy XIV. Let me explain. Final Fantasy Online games are going through a kind of a rough growth period. Obviously, FF11 was early, they had success, but FF14, when it first came out, was terrible because they were making the game in a bubble. They were making the game in this like very, very 2012, like mid 2010s sort of like Japanese mindset where we don't want to copy what anybody else is doing. We're going to do our own unique things, right? So their own unique things just wasn't taking from anything else the space was evolving into at the time, meaning that some of the cool ideas present in 11 were still continuing over into modern games at the time in like 2012. So that just wasn't working, right? It didn't feel good. What did they do to fix that? Oh, like, oh, well, so let's actually get somebody that likes MMOs and shit and get them to start helming Final Fantasy XIV, and voila, you get an amazing game. It was one of like the first times you look at Square, and Square's like an acknowledgement of the rest of the industry. And it's like, hey, Yoshi P's like, I love this shit. This is what I like. Let's look at the rest of the industry and take what they're doing well and put our own spin on it. And what did it do? Well, now it's essentially Square's giant moneymaker, right? It's their forever moneymaker game. It's never going to end. What I really appreciate about Final Fantasy Remake and Rebirth, Remake was obviously going for that Yakuza style. Clear. It was clear as day that that's what they're doing. With unique other stuff here and there. However, Rebirth isn't just that. Rebirth is taking essentially the open-ended environments and interactability of something similar to Horizon. The dev said this specifically. The towns feel very much more, I'd say, alive and interactive, closer to the Yakuza game, so they moved that in a different direction. They also applied it to their bigger, large-scale towns. They really went ham on the parts of the game that needed to be expanded from what they had before. And by taking all of these like little elements from other games, and the biggest one is side quests. Side content needs to be important. It's what fills out your world. So they looked at games like The Witcher, and the director said this, where it's like, hey, The Witcher's got great side quests. And he said in an interview, we're just going to do what The Witcher does with their side quests. Granted, I didn't play all that much of The Witcher 3, but people scream to the heavens that that game has incredible side quests. So this game isn't just one thing anymore, and it's trying not to be completely unique. And if anything, this is probably one of the least unique Final Fantasies ever. Final Fantasy 16 was at least trying to like take an action game and turn it into an RPG of kinds, where it's like, hey, we can make a big action RPG that lasts like 35 to 40 hours. We can do that to varying degrees of success, you know? At least Final Fantasy 16 was trying to be sort of unique with what it is. And Rebirth is not. Rebirth is like an admittance that the industry has changed a lot over the years. And clearly what we should be doing is looking at what other games do well, because players expect to explore our open world thoroughly. It's like the big Final Fantasy. This is the moment in this series, or I'm sorry, in FF7, that people have some of the most fond memories of. It's not Midgar, it's the world of FF7. I've never been so happy to play a Ubisoft game. So what they really tried to do was take pieces from everything. It's a little bit of Horizon, it's a bit of Yakuza, it's a bit of Witcher, it's a little bit of all these other things. It's a bit of like Ubisoft games in a way that doesn't feel like contrived and just, hey, we just want to put shit everywhere and just make you waste your time. There's a quote from Kitase, and he's like, yeah, our game's like 100 to 150 hours or something like that if you do everything. And it's like, bullshit, dude. No way. There's no way. Whatever you're talking about, that is not true. It's a nice number, right? You got a triple digit number in a Final Fantasy game and you get people to go, duh, that's interesting. But I could see through this like marketing, and clearly this game is not going to be that. Oh, holy sweet Jesus Christ, it is that. This game is so much fun. Any gripes yet? No, dude. I've been playing this shit for how many hours? I've been in this bitch for 17 hours and I don't feel like I'm burned out on anything yet. That's what's crazy. I don't feel like any of it has been like wasted, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I wish I was doing something else. Like, no, man, I'm like into this shit. It actually is, because it's good. It's weirdly good. I had spent 11 to 12 hours in the grasslands. I didn't even intend to do everything. Everything was interesting enough for me to keep going to the next thing and get rewarded and do something else and see something new constantly. And I was in the first area and you could just fly by it, right? You could take 30 minutes and just go from one end to the next and be at the next part of the game, but I didn't. I spent like 10 extra hours there. I was not ready for that. And then I'm like, all right. So the opening of this game is really powerful, right? It's got a great opening. It's got a great flashback. All this stuff is good. But it can't keep this up, right? And then you finally get an idea of what dungeons are like. So what was the biggest issue in Remake? Their level design was balls. Like, going through any of its maps was truly bad. And it just felt like, all right, this is just going for the sake of going. It got a little bit better in intermission with the Yuffie stuff, but Rebirth, its level designs isn't pioneering and revolutionary. We're not there at the point of like a FromSoft game or anything, but I'm legit enjoying any of the places I go to. At this point, we've been to only a couple of big map areas, and it's like kind of the opening, right? The climb up Mountain to Bell is great. It's dynamic and different, and all these things are happening. It's still a friggin' hallway, but enough stuff is happening where I'm like curious and fascinated by what's going on next. And then I'm like, all right, that's the opening. It's only going to be that good for that. And then you get to the Mithril Mines, and they're great. The Mithril Mines are super good. They expand on it. They add all this extra lore. They do all this extra stuff. It's freaking gorgeous. Like, you finally get a really dark zone, someplace that isn't well lit, and it's like, oh, dude, this is so good. And then you leave the Mithril Mines and you get access to Junon. My impression is from the demo, I know this place probably isn't that big. It's not going to be nearly as big as the Grasslands. Grasslands is probably just getting you hyped up. It's like better, and it's bigger. I remember looking in the distance when we were playing that demo, right? And you see pirate ships in the distance. I'm like, that's cool. It's neat that there's pirate ships, all this extra lore over there. There's no way you're going to be able to visit any of that stuff. And you totally do. And they give like every part of it has story and shit. And they go into every like little detail and they expand upon it. They add like the crow's nest. They do all this stuff that expands Avalanche and anti-Shinra resistance stuff. It's like, holy hell. So I was just blown away by every single part of Junon. And I hadn't even gone into the goddamn city yet, dude. I had not even gone to Under Junon or the parade. I hadn't even gone there yet. And then they flip it. They change the time of day. The time of day switches in Junon and the entire place looks different. And I'm like, Jesus, I feel like this is an entirely new zone. The same thing happened when you first arrive in Junon. It goes to sunset. You go back to the grasslands and everything looks different. I'm like, whoa, dang. This pre-baked lighting, as soon as it changes, this place is gorgeous. This just keeps happening, right? And I have to say this, like, I'm 5 days into this bitch. This is my 5th day. And I have been one-upped and then one-upped again and again and again and again. And there's just new surprises and crazy stuff to the point where last night we just did Costa del Sol and main story stuff with the Shinra 8, the boat that crosses the ocean, as well as the Junon parade. And it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how much charm, how much love and care goes into all of it. All of the extra dialogue, all of the characters in all of these cities is not just like BS that's there. Like almost every NPC is so crammed with like charm and relatability and interest and true like human shit.
Don't you think I would if I could? God, I'm a shit player. Don't you get that? Whatever you say.
Wow. I'm a shit player. I can't even. I'm starting to wonder, is my love for Final Fantasy VII acting as this sort of barrier of perception. Am I sort of being blinded by this game is like really not that good, but the FF7 aspects of it are elevating it so much for me. And to be real, I don't think so. Because even upon playing Remake, I was able to identify that. Where it was like, I love Final Fantasy VII, and it definitely is elevating some of this parts of this game over others. But, bro, yeah, the drum was not good. Sewer revisit, you know, a lot of the stuff in the game, the side quests, I could identify at the end of the playthrough that it wasn't perfect. It was not great. All of my gripes from Remake are fixed in this game, and the combat is incredible. And we're like chapter 5 or 6 now, something like that. We're not even halfway through the game. Stardust Ray. Oh, jeez, dude, what is this? It's so crazy. Look how cool we are, dude! Look at this game, bro! Look at it! Jeez! The music, did I even mention, it's insane. I feel like I'm fucking dreaming, dude. This game feels like I'm dreaming. Dude. My God. My God. And then you come across like something else that is equally incredible and amazing, and some new thing that just blows your mind with how they approach like a music. I played it at the start of this stream. We did the first Genova fight. I could not believe the music cue in the first Genova fight. I couldn't believe how cool it was. And I don't even want to like spoil too much of it, because it just was like, the shit brought like a tear to my eye as I was fighting. I could not believe what I was hearing. I think this game's the real deal. I really do. And as I went back and I sort of have this perspective where I'm like, God damn, this game seems really good. I finally looked up the reviews, and the game was sitting at like a 92 or 93 on compendium critical sites, right? This game is reviewing better than any Final Fantasy for 20 years, which is a very long fucking time. It's up there with like Final Fantasy XII, which was the very end of the Final Fantasy Golden Era, right before things go a little weird in the HD era, right? So it's wild. It's kind of crazy to look at the game and realize that like, oh no, it isn't just me that loves this. This is actually heavily critically praised, like extremely critically praised. We're not even through the game yet, man, right? We're not even getting through this entire thing. We're only like a portion through it. All I gotta say is that, like, as an FF7 fan, this shit'll blow your mind. As a general JRPG or RPG fan, this shit'll most likely blow your mind. It's really good. They've made one of the most charming games I've ever seen. Not even halfway through, and I literally feel like I'm dreaming. This game is something else.